The Dunwich Legacy was the first full campaign released for Arkham Horror the card game. It proudly promised backroom thugs and bad luck to arcane hexes and wholly unnatural abominations. The release brought with it 5 new investigators and new player cards to expand the collection, but for those of us who just started playing from the beginning, the excitement for the first full campaign was palpable. Since its release, the Dunwich Legacy has had its supporters and its detractors. People often praise its simplicity and classic Arkham feel, but also acknowledge its weaknesses. Designs that hadn't found its footing, swingy scenarios, and rough edges that seem to box certain investigators out. Regardless of its positives and negatives, the Dunwich Legacy is a critical piece of Arkham Horror's history. It is still played and loved by many within the community, marking its success as the first 8-scenario campaign, even with its blemishes. To better understand and appreciate the campaign, we're going to look back at its release and its impact on Arkham Horror the card game. This is the history of the Dunwich Legacy campaign. On September 9th, 2016, the announcement article was released. This article revealed Zoe Samaras in full, revealing the new deck-building rules the investigators in the expansion would take. For Travis, Bryn, and myself, this was a nice addition to the game. At this point, only Travis had a copy, meaning that we split the collection between 3 players. This new deck building, now referred to as Dunwich deck building, allowed us to focus on a specific class with little overlap. We knew all of these investigators from previous Arkham Files games. We were excited to see how they would translate to the card game and to learn more of the characters through their signatures and weaknesses. Zoe's zealous character was further enhanced with her cross and her quest to smite the wicked. Additionally, within this article we were teased the new campaign structure. You must understand that at this point the only campaign play that existed was Night of the Zealot. This campaign is fine, but people often say that Arkham Horror really unlocks when you get a full campaign. We were itching for something new, and Dunwich immediately teased something new. Before I get to this tease, I think it's only right to touch on the release structure. Back in the day, player cards and campaigns were released in a Deluxe Box and Mythos Pack style. This was first a big box release which provided the first 2 scenarios, the investigators, and the encounter cards that would supplement the rest of the cycle. Then, there would be 6 Mythos Packs that would contain more player cards and the remaining 6 scenarios. It just seemed right at the time. This is how Fantasy Flight Games released every other living card game product they produced, but looking back, this obviously wasn't the best format and was changed. However, within this release format, Dunwich campaign structure proved to be an interesting hook. You could play either scenario first, and the scenario played first would have an impact on the scenario you played second. Within context of what existed at the time, this was an excellent pitch that showcased the potential depth that this game could have. What would change from one scenario to the other? We couldn't wait to dive in. Within the next months, the remaining investigators in the box were revealed. We bore witness to Rex Murphy, Jenny Barnes, Jim Culver, and Ashcan Pete. Then, on January 12th, 2017, the Deluxe Box was released. Upon release, The House Always Wins was an exciting scenario for Arkham Horror the card game. Until this point, gameplay was relatively set in its method of find clues, fight enemies, and advance the objective. While the latter half of House Always Wins brought this to the table, the opening gambling section of the scenario was an incredible change of pace to the Arkham formula. You're faced with a starting location with clues, a bouncer that follows you around, and then alternate methods inside the club to gather more clues. This included gambling, schmoozing, and selling your friends to the mob, but this small change to the traditional game plan was eye-opening to the vast potential the game presented. At the turning point of the scenario, the abominations come crashing in and the game gives a glimpse of what is to come. The eldritch monstrosities are here and Yogg Sothoth's influence first appears. Now the players need to grab their target, depending on the order they choose to play this in, and get out alive. On the flip side, extracurricular activity presented a very traditional Arkham experience, but gave a few twists on the format to showcase to the players what the game could do. Jazz Mulligan, the elusive janitor, gets shuffled into the encounter deck, giving players a tease on the idea of objectives being in the encounter deck itself. Also, when the big bad shows up, the players are given multiple paths to victory, and some of those paths are enhanced depending on if you can play the scenario first or second. This opening deluxe box gave a surprising amount of replayability at its time, something that is not able to be appreciated with the current form the game takes. With 2 scenarios that change depending on the order played, players would play the first 2 scenarios multiple times in anticipation of the first Mythos pack. 1 month later, on February 16, 2017, the Miskatonic Museum Mythos pack released. This release continued on the excitement of the deluxe release, allowing for Arkham to be a mainstay at the tables of players. While the new big box format is better for players without a doubt, the constant announcement articles and product drops in this old format allowed Arkham to always be in the tabletop zeitgeist. A lot of players from that time miss that feeling, but it makes sense why the Mythos packs were retired. As for the scenario itself, this scenario brought in a unique Arkham experience that hasn't been replicated since. This scenario only has one enemy, a slithering, hunting horror that chases you around the otherwise empty museum. At release, the weaknesses of the scenario were less apparent on initial plays. In early Arkham, everyone was scrapping through it together. Collections were small and players leaned heavily on key assets and used other cards to commit to tests. This meant that players were able to snatch up more clues in their downtime between hunting horror attacks, but as investigator roles and decks became more focused, this scenario started to feel a lot emptier. Here, at Playing Board Games, funnily enough, we initially gave this scenario 3 out of 5 overall, a score that would be quite lower today. The next Mythos pack revealed is a very important piece of Arkham's story and the Dunwich Legacy campaign. Arkham players all boarded up on the Essex County Express and were blown away by the thematic nature of this scenario. Before this scenario, most locations in the game were just generic locations. Maps were laid out without much thematic reasoning behind them, but Essex County Express flipped that on its head and told a story through its location placement. Inside the scenario itself, players were pressured hard for the first time in Arkham's history. They were told to run, and if they didn't, they'd soon understand why that warning was there. The first train car getting sucked into the void is a memorable moment in all players' Arkham experience, and it can still provide tension going into the scenario today. Today, most 4-player groups are aware of some of the shortcomings of this scenario. If you know, you know. A lot of people look at some of those rough edges of the scenario designs of the Dunwich Legacy and use this as one of the examples. Those feel-bad moments, they do feel bad, but they can't deny the monumental impact the scenario had on this game. With the train behind the investigators, their next stop arrived in Dunwich Village. This was the first glimpse the players had at the story featured in the short story, and it provided a good, alienating feeling while continuing to provide new approaches for objectives given to the players. It also provided a unique twist depending on player choices earlier in the campaign, where actions at the club and the house always wins can come back to bite you. This was a well-liked scenario upon its release, and was one of the highest rated scenarios in our initial reviews of the campaign. It was some no-nonsense Arkham, but the scenario provided the first big twist on the campaign structure that wasn't apparent in Night of the Zealot. Leading up to this moment, anyone that you've been unable to save has been kidnapped. Dang, sucks, right? During this scenario, any kidnapped victims can be sacrificed to Yog-Sothoth, merging the narrative of the campaign story with the mechanics of the scenario in a wonderful way. Personally, for me, this is still one of my favorite moments in the entirety of Arkham's catalog. There's a beautiful dance of design happening here that I don't know is appreciated as much as I want it to be. This moment hit hard on my first playthrough, and it continues to be something that I look forward to every time I play this scenario. The next Mythos pack released was Undimensioned and Unseen, a scenario that is now much maligned by the community. This scenario provided a unique challenge of hunting down baby Dunwich horrors, battling them in similar ways that Armitage and the gang did in the original short story. This scenario gets a lot of criticism for the random movement of the broods, and also for the fact that you can only damage the broods of Yog-Sothoth with your willpower score. While the scenario provides ways to make this easier, the random movement makes it feel swingier than it should be and turns the scenario into a bit of a drag. Our blind play of this scenario was over 2 hours long, something unheard of for our runs of Arkham at the time. However, funnily enough, we still enjoyed this scenario, giving it a review of 3.5 out of 5. This, of course, waned on replays, and as we played other new scenarios at Arkham's library. But there's an argument that the theme and translation of the short story shine in the scenario, mechanics aside. At the time of its release, Undimensioned and Unseen brought something new to the table in terms of scaling scenario difficulties that isn't seen as much in Arkham today. If you had more victims sacrificed to Yog-Sothoth in the previous scenario, you had less brutes to deal with, and vice versa. This brought an interesting impact to the relationship between the two scenarios, something that had both praise and criticism at the time. The penultimate scenario of the campaign was an exciting release. Before this, there was only Night of the Zealot, which, while entertaining enough at the time, didn't have the same impact as this campaign leading to this moment. This felt like a journey. Investigators' decks had more experience, and players were able to feel more connected to their deck and the cards in that deck. Where Doom Awaits sees the investigators climb Sentinel Hill and feels like a greatest hits of the entire campaign. At the time, and even now, one of the most notable things you'll hear someone say about Where Doom Awaits is that the encounter deck is big. Where Doom Awaits has 7 encounter sets by default, but can have 8 depending on the decisions made prior to this scenario. This leads to a slightly disjointed experience for players in Where Doom Awaits, as there is a lot of variance to what the encounter deck can give the players. At the time, we were not big fans of this scenario on the channel, giving it only a 2 out of 5 in our overall rating. Where Doom Awaits also has a big sticking point in its design that was ultimately fixed in the Return to. The only way to progress this scenario was with intellect checks, meaning that team compositions with low intellect were faced with a very hard wall to climb. Again, scrappier Arkham with a smaller collection was able to find a way to work together to climb this mountain, but it's one of the many criticisms that this scenario has. With the final Mythos pack Lost in Time and Space, the Arkham community was treated to their first final campaign of the 8 scenario format. This scenario promised a showdown with Yog-Sothoth and hinted towards all the decisions you've made up to that point mattering in a cosmic climax. For those that don't know, Lost in Time and Space was a perfect title for this scenario for Arkham Files fans. In Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, getting lost in time and space was a common occurrence while exploring other worlds. This set the stage perfectly, giving an idea of what would be happening to the investigators. Mechanically, the scenario explored something entirely new to the game and something that is occasionally be touched on again in newer scenarios. Locations were in the encounter deck. This meant that the map started simple, but would slowly grow and collapse as the universes and dimension exploded and imploded around the players. This meant that paths would change and everyone would always need to be on their toes. This all led to a big showdown with Yog-Sothoth, but showdown, it might not even be the right word. In most other final scenarios, players would have an objective of directly tackling that campaign's Ancient One. In this scenario, Yog turned into an ever-present entity, one that the players sought to avoid. Defeating him was possible, but at the time, that seemed like an impossible mountain to climb, and ultimately desperately finding escape from the cosmos was the better option. This scenario was well loved at release. It was a glorious finale and a great example of what the game was capable of. It was simple, yet difficult, thematic, and rewarding, and a great culmination of everything that came before it. Today, it is still a well-loved scenario. Many people point to it as one of their favorite finales. Tight design goes far in this game, and arguably Lost in Time and Space may be the pinnacle of it. The Dunwich Legacy is obviously an important campaign for Arkham Horror the card game. While it can be argued that every campaign is important, this was the only first chance that the designers had to prove that the card game had legs. It's a fair argument that not only the Dunwich Legacy proved that, it provided a good foundation to build off of. Dunwich showcased what the game was capable of. It could bounce from a traditional Arkham experience, moving around and getting clues, to flipping the game on its head and telling you to run from an ever-consuming void. It could provide Monster of the Week experiences like a ravaging experiment, or epic boss moments dripped deep in Lovecraftian inspiration like Silas Bishop. It would then go on and learn from the campaign's rough edges, providing all team compositions with avenues for success, leaving nobody behind. In the current world of Arkham, Dunwich provides a wonderful simplicity that is often left behind. For some, that's a positive, but for others, acknowledgments of Dunwich's design philosophies are welcomed with open arms. Scenarios that evolve over time were touched on in The Drowned City, calling back to a similar feeling that Dunwich provided. The campaign itself can act as an inspiration for structure today, showcasing the incredible impact this campaign had on the game. It's hard to answer what made Arkham Horror the card game great, but part of that answer lives in what was formed in this campaign. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this video and its format. I tried something new with this, so if you enjoyed it, please let me know in the comments. If you want to support our channel and me and our content, you can check out our Patreon, but in the meantime, have a great one. Enjoy the rest of Dunwich Week. Thanks for watching, and as always, a GG's.